Hello and welcome to the Colts Cover-2 Podcast. I am Joel A. Erickson. I am joined by the new Colts insider for the Indy Star, along with me, Nathan Brown. Nathan has been covering IndyCar for us. As some of you know, we have had this is a pipeline that has worked before. Jim Aiello was an IndyCar person before moving on. Nathan, why don't you just tell the listeners a little bit about why you wanted to move off of race cars and onto the football?
Yeah, so I think we've talked about this a time or two before, but Joel coming to Indianapolis to join the Colts beat back in, fall of 2018, led to me getting my first taste of covering the NFL. Not necessarily in his stead, but a couple jobs changed around at the New Orleans Advocate that allowed me to land a job there kind of as a GA reporter, where I did everything from managing the paper's high school coverage to being the de facto Pelicans writer, and also getting a chance to help out on the Saints beat in the 2018 season, 2019 playoffs, and got my first taste of that, and really enjoyed just the couple months that I got to dip my toes into the NFL world. Got to cover a conference championship game. Should have been able to cover a Super Bowl if not for the referees, who I won't name, who officiated that 2019 Rams Saints NFC championship game. But then that, those were my handful of games that I had covering the NFL. Thought at that point that I'd love to have an opportunity to get back to this, but hadn't had that chance here up until now. Had the opportunity to move back to Indianapolis. I'm actually from the Indy area. For those of you who don't know, grew up in Noblesville, went to Noblesville High School, went to college at IU. So growing up in central Indiana, and kind of during that Peyton Manning Colts era, as I was growing up, got to watch some great football during that, and really excited to jump into the NFL. As Joel mentioned, I've been on the IndyCar beat for quite literally just over 6 years. Loved my time there. Had a little bit of IndyCar knowledge and picked that up really quickly. And I think kind of similar to this, I've got a lot of cursory NFL knowledge, a couple months of actually being able to work on a beat, and really excited to dust off that work and experience and get rolling here in the middle of covering a team that's on a historic roll here this season.
I do think that it's interesting. This is the first time that we have had a Hoosier on the beat, a native Hoosier on the beat, since Zach Kiefer was part of the Colts Cover-2. So you are my fourth co-host, unless if we count Nat Newell, it's my fifth, but you're my fourth one. You've got some of the the inherent growing up with it that I think that is something that I don't necessarily have. In terms of you, I don't think you probably thought, though, that the numbers you were going to get from the numbers most likely to be like the Peyton Manning era were going to be from this team coming forward.
No, definitely don't think so. I don't know that anyone, except for maybe the folks at 56th Street, were expecting what we've seen in the first 7 weeks of this NFL season. Lot to talk about and dive into there, about particularly this offense and the way that Daniel Jones and company have turned things around. But this has been, watching this from afar come together over the first 7 weeks of the season has been incredibly impressive, and really excited to dive in starting on Sunday in this home game against the Titans, and see a little bit more in person and how this offense and this team in general operates, and how they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah, you do kind of, you always knock on wood with this, I think, because it's the NFL and bad teams have a tendency to beat good teams randomly. But you're kind of easing into it, I think, because this Titans team, man, it is not great. I tried. Listeners of this pod know that I do like our game preview on Tuesdays, and so I'm kind of geared up for this pod. I was looking at it. They're really bad at like everything. There's just there's not really anything that they do super well that they can hang their hat on. Cam Ward has some potential, but he's also turned the ball over 10 times. They've sacked him 30 times. Yeah, there's just not a lot to talk about in terms of the Titans and this matchup, other than it's a rivalry game, and rivalry games, I think the players will tell you it's not, you don't overlook teams like this because they're in your division. But other than that, this is just not that interesting a matchup because the Titans they're so bad right now.
No, I mean, you have a lot of guys that we talked to in the locker room earlier this afternoon spoke a little bit about how you can't overlook a team like this. And even though this is like 14 or 14 and a half point spread coming into Sunday right now, I believe, depending on the betting service that you look at, that these teams are way closer in terms of talent and ability than it might look like on paper. But when it comes down to it, I mean, the Colts showed us just a couple weeks ago, how much better they looked a couple Sundays ago when they put a beating down on this Titans team. And there's probably some give and take in the fact that this Colts team has seen Tennessee before, and Tennessee has seen them before too. They can maybe better prepare a little bit more, but the Colts can also look at everything they did right in that game that led to that blowout victory, and sharpen just the couple things that they did wrong. Like you, I don't know that I expect this to be a super close game, but we'll see what this turns into on Sunday. I've certainly seen, and I know you have too in your time on the beat, there have been plenty of games, though it's been oftentimes at the end of the season when there have been playoff spots on the line that the Colts have, let's say, lost games that they shouldn't have lost with a lot riding on it. This is not maybe quite that situation, although in the end, when it comes down to playoffs and seeding and what have you, every game quite literally matters as much. And so you would certainly hope and expect that this team, given what they've shown us the first 7 weeks of the year, will come out just as sharp as they've been to start the season and get rolling into this one.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that go against the Titans too. With this one, and number one, I think the obvious one is just they just don't have their coach anymore. He's gone. Brian Callahan's not there now. Is Brian Callahan a good coach? No, I don't think he was a good coach, but I do think that when a team fires a coach, most of the time mid-season, most of the time the interim coach struggles, and it gets worse after maybe the initial bump. The initial bump didn't happen for this team last week. And then the other piece of this, and I just looked this up just to make sure that I had it. Jeffrey Simmons is the only good player on this Titans team, the only one that you'd desperately want. Mike McCoy, the interim head coach, said that he's week to week with the hamstring injury he suffered against the Patriots. Week to week means he's not playing this week.
No, yeah.
And then the other one is L'Jarius Sneed, the cornerback, is going to miss some time moving forward with a quad injury. So he's also out. So your two big name veterans on defense are also out. And now the Titans are going up against this Colts offense that is the best in the NFL.
And historically great when we're looking at points per possession and points they've scored so far this year, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. And they don't have those players. They don't have their head coach. Cam Ward looks lost. The Colts have some issues, but man, I think we got a comment here that that kind of goes into this. So Imagine Eric says, in the past, Colts teams have seemed to play up down to their opponent. This year's team seems different in that regard. Hopefully that continues this week. That's a good point. That's a really good point. There's been a lot of times over the years where they've had bad games against teams like this and kind of lost them. But so far this year, they have annihilated teams like this. Mm-hmm. They annihilated the Dolphins. They annihilated the Raiders. They beat this team pretty bad the first time. Imagine Eric's got a good point. So far what we've seen from this team, it does not suggest that this is a team that lets down on opponents like this. If anything, it's been the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned there, this is folks that don't want to fully believe and buy into what the Colts have looked like on the field and the resume that they have put together so far this year, being the only 6-1 team in the NFL. They can point to the the opponents that the Colts have beaten, as you mentioned, beaten a Dolphins team in game 1 of the year that probably should have already fired their head coach and hasn't yet. Beat this Titans team 41-20. Beat a Raiders team 40-6. It's very clear. You don't have one tidbit or one nugget, one hint that so far this year, this group, this roster, and Shaden Steichen and his coaching staff have yet led up in a game that they should dominate. Obviously, there are still plenty of opportunities for that. This is one of those. But you always worry maybe a little bit, especially when you have a game coming up here the following week, a road matchup against a solid Steelers team that's looking like a playoff squad at the moment. You worry a little bit about looking too far ahead, and maybe this is an instance of something like that. But I don't know that you can go into a game like this and expect that to happen, especially when we haven't seen it so far this year.
Yeah, I rarely say this, but I'll be shocked if the Colts lose this game. Like truly, truly shocked. It's just a really bad Titans team.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I don't know who you would say. Maybe it's the Jets that have not won a game yet this year, but outside of them, I don't know what team you would say in the league right now has looked worse than what this Titans team has looked at so far this year.
And seems to be like as rudderless because they don't, like I said, they don't have a head coach. They don't seem like their players are missing all that stuff. I think the discussion point though that most people are probably looking at is this Colts team is really good. It's better than anybody thought they were. And all of a sudden all this stuff is open. So how do they get better for the stretch run? Now we know you and I have both written about this in the last couple of days. The trade deadline is coming up on November 1st. It's a little bit later than it used to be, feels like. And Chris Ballard historically has not made moves at this time. He's made one deal. It was when Nyheim Hines asked out. He didn't want to be a Colt anymore during the 2022 season. Weirdly enough, that deal ended up working out better for the Colts than it did for the Bills because they got Zach Moss out of it. I think to some degree that's an example of why Ballard doesn't like to do moves at the deadline because it's not as easy as just plugging and playing a player. But this team does feel like it's set up to need to get some help at the deadline. You've taken a look at this. I think you kind of settled on pass rusher. What do you think is what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just when I was thinking about and writing the story over the last couple of days that I published on Indy Star this morning, I mean the first thing that stands out to me is if you don't make a deal in the next 10 days to 2 weeks around this trade deadline this year, I just don't know when you ever would, outside of a situation like Hines asking out and asking to be traded to a contender like he did a couple of years ago. This is a team that has, as we mentioned, a historically great offense. I think you certainly can argue the best offense in the NFL, at least at the moment, from what we've seen, what the statistics say, and we'll see some better opponents and see how they stack up again against them over the next month to 6 weeks or so. But this seems like one of those moments where you just push the chips into the center of the table and go all in. This is a team that over the last decade has very rarely, if ever, had moments like this. The last time they were a number 1 seed in the AFC was, I think, 2009, the year that they got to the Super Bowl and lost to the Saints. This is an AFC that, outside the Colts, doesn't really feel like it has a truly dominant team. We've seen the Bills trip up. The Chiefs have tripped up, although more so early in the season, and they're seeming like they're starting to come on here a little bit. The Patriots have looked fairly strong, but they're a young, inexperienced team. This just feels to me like a moment where, if ever there was time for, an all-in, a roll of the dice type move, if you will, that this would be the time to do it. I don't know if there's anything outside of getting some insurance at the quarterback position for a backup that you would do. I don't know why you would do anything from a wide receiver, running back standpoint for any reason, but the defense feels like the place where they can get a little bit better. Time will allow them to get healthier. We can talk about that later on the podcast, where they are health-wise at defensive end and the secondary, but it just feels like they're one piece away, especially I feel like either at defensive end or guys who can rush the edge, even if they're in the linebacker position, to really start hitting not only more home runs, being able to consistently bring pressure that leads to more execution and just make things easier on the secondary, a unit that is, as I mentioned, banged up. And even at its healthiest, maybe not you would say the best unit on this team at the moment.
So in terms of the pass rush, and I think this is the interesting piece, looking at, why you get a pass rusher. This team is, if you look at the next gen stats, the NFL's next gen stats, this team is third in pressure rate, which is honestly surprising to me. They're also seventh in sacks. Some of them being seventh in sacks is the fact that other teams have had their bye. I think the fact that the Colts have played one more game than some teams probably helps them. But them being in the top 10 in sacks and being top third in pressure rate, you would think that would suggest that this pass rush has been really good. If you look at their sacks per pass attempt, they're 19th. They're 19th in the NFL so far. And I think that fits more with what most of us have seen from a pass rush standpoint. I did some more digging, and I'm trying to figure out a way to write this at some point. But I think the real disconnect is when they win in the pass rush. So there's Next Gen Stats has a metric for quick pressures, not just pressures, but quick pressures that are under, I think, 3 seconds or 2.75. I don't have it right in front of me. And the Colts only have 2 players in the top 50 in the NFL in quick pressures. One of them is DeForest Buckner. The other one is Adetomiwa Abare. So those are both defensive tackles. Buckner gets double teamed. He might be getting double teamed right now while he's sitting there watching film. The way his season is going. But he's your best pass rusher. He's always been your best pass rusher. I think that's where the disconnect comes in. And so a player who can win earlier in the down more consistently could definitely help this edge rush. Just in terms of the way Chris Ballard tends to operate, I've been leaning more towards a player like Cam Taylor-Britt out of Cincinnati, because Cincinnati apparently doesn't have any use for him, and Lou Anarumo knows him. They've been very heavy on Lou Anarumo guys. And I think the other thing is just they're so thin at corner. They're so thin at the cornerback position. I don't think that the upside is there with him. I know a lot of people have said Tariq Woolen. I don't watch the Seahawks regularly, so I don't know this. I kind of have to rely on what other people have said. Matt Bowen at ESPN was saying that he's not great at the identification. I think that probably makes him a bad fit for Lou Anarumo because they do so much in the defense. I think, though, that the numbers and the way they've approached the cornerback position, just constantly trying to find solutions there, some of the injury issues, I think, lends more towards the corner. But I can see the argument for a pass rusher.
So my question there is when you look at those corner options, and it really feels like Cam Taylor-Britt and Tariq Woolen were the only guys that stood out to me when I was doing some reading and doing some research to try to figure out guys that might realistically be on the market. Obviously, there could be folks that come out of the woodwork, or a team that suddenly decides in a week that they're going to become a seller, and maybe they aren't so right now, or thinking of themselves as being that right now. I feel like there could be more impact type guys at that pass rush, whether it be, defensive end or at the linebacker position. And I wonder if you're adding a cornerback, if you're kind of just bringing that unit to, maybe being, instead of being average or even slightly below average, to being one that is, teetering right around that edge. And I don't know if you're doing more than helping out your health needs there right now. Is Cam Taylor-Britt, is that someone who's going to had they added him at the start of the season before they started to rack up some injuries, is that someone who would have been starting for them? I don't know necessarily. Maybe he would be. I don't know enough about him, but my thought in looking at the guys who might be available at linebacker or defensive end, and the two players that I kind of settled on, both members of the Miami Dolphins linebacker core, Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips. I just wonder if improving the front seven would not only help add up sacks, just make things more difficult for the opposing quarterbacks that they're going to be playing, a group that frankly is on paper at least better than the list of quarterbacks that they've played so far this year. I just wonder if improving that group could help out both sides of things, make essentially a better front seven, and actually make things a little bit easier for that secondary unit that still has a lot of guys either working back from injury or still on IR, whereas adding a body in the secondary maybe just kind of helps you until you get through these injuries.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a chicken or egg type of thing where the pass rusher, I think, maybe raises the ceiling of what the defense could do. And I think the cornerback raises the floor. I think the way they're playing and what I've seen, what I've seen is that the floor is pretty low right now in the secondary. They're playing practice squad corners essentially. No offense to Jonathan Edwards, who I like as a developmental corner. No offense to Cameron Mitchell or Mekhi Blackman, but they've got guys right now playing full starting snaps who are supposed to be rotational. They don't want to play Jonathan Edwards more than 7 to 10 snaps a game. They don't want to. Mekhi Blackman is supposed to be a speed only guy. I just think that in watching the games, what sticks out to me is how open receivers are right away. And when they play those better corners, that's a way to negate the pass rush. Is you just when they've played, when Xavier Howard was on the team and they had Matthew Stafford, that was a game that the pass rush actually looked pretty good. And it didn't really matter because they kept beating Xavier Howard so quickly on the one side of the field. So the thing is, ultimately, you probably want both. You probably want both. It's just the reality of the trade deadline and the reality of the way Chris Ballard has operated is that you're probably only getting one. Is my guess.
I mean, the odds of Chris Ballard going 7 years and making one single deadline trade, and then in a single couple weeks making two of them, feels like it would be inconceivable to happen. Now, if they do that, that's proof as much as any that they view this as an all-in type situation, as I feel like you probably should. And they've traded, I think, a 6th round pick for Blackman. So they have, outside that pick, they've got all of their trade assets from a draft pick standpoint there next year. I haven't looked into what is there beyond that, but it seems like you've got some draft capital that you can work with. I don't know, I don't, like I said, in the IndyCar world, I don't like spending people's money. And I guess in the football world, I don't know that I feel great just going and giving people's draft picks away. But this just seems, that's what I would vote for. I think you could certainly improve things a lot if you did both of those moves, but I don't know that we can expect that.
I do. I have no problem trading their draft picks. I think the other thing is, I think that the lists I've seen, a lot of these guys are probably more 4th or later type of picks. And Chris Ballard can get those back. We have Imagine Eric, our guy Imagine Eric is on your side. He says Bradley Chubb seems like he could be a realistic trade target for both sides. And he also says he agrees with you. Improve the pass rush so the corners don't have to cover for as long. Like I said, it's a chicken or an egg thing. I kind of think that the corners are getting beat right away. I also think my other thing is just right now they seem to have all 5 defensive ends are in the plan going forward. Maybe they feel that way about corner. I'm pretty concerned about the Ward injury, and Jalen Jones hasn't played this year, so I think that's part of it. But again, you probably want both.
So how do you feel about this linebacker core? If you're talking about Jalen Phillips or Bradley Chubb, guys that play on the
they're going to be defensive ends in this defense.
Okay.
The way Anarumo is playing, he's minimized the linebackers. you're essentially playing one linebacker all the snaps. He's played the weak side a little bit more with Jermaine Pratt since he's been here, but really this is a 4-man front. Now I will say this: he does play 3-4. He does play 3-4 in the course of stuff. It's generally been more base when they're playing teams that he thinks are going to run the ball. They bring in Neville Gallimore, and then those defensive ends become outside. So if you wanted to, it's in the defense to play more of a 3-4 outside linebacker role. But in terms of the way I think the defense sets up practically, it's you're improving that edge rusher, pass rusher, and you're improving corner because, like some of the guys that are available at linebacker, unless you could get a coverage guy, a really good one, I don't think you're improving the linebackers that much.
Mm-hmm. The other thing to consider there too, and again, I'm still brushing up a little bit on my salary cap knowledge, so I don't pretend to be an expert there. But the one thing is, I was researching this story that published this morning. The Colts have just north of $4 million available in the cap, and both Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb have contracts this year on the books or cap hits north of $12 million. So not only are you having to give away assets, you're also having to make up that difference, sending players out. And I don't necessarily know who that might be or what would what would allow that to happen and what you'd be giving up there to help make that difference there. So that's something to keep in mind too. And why something like that might be a little bit more difficult than getting, say, a Cam Taylor-Britt or a Tariq Woolen, who I believe have deals that are far less expensive and would be easier to figure out with the cap where it is right now.
Yeah, I always assume that they probably just do like a simple restructure on somebody.
Yeah, sure.
And the Colts are sort of famous for not doing that kind of stuff, but they'll put void years into some deals. They just restructured Kenny Moore's deal. So there's some stuff like that, where they look at it like that. Sean Zibikowski says true Super Bowl contenders rush with just 4. Eagles, Bucks, and Rams are examples that it's so critical for them to get to that point. I think that's true. I don't know that you have the. I don't know that I think that one trade can get you to the Eagles or Rams level.
Yeah.
With this defense is 16th in DVOA. The offense is first, and the special teams is really high, and the defense is 16th. Short of a Max Crosby level player who it was just reported is not going to be dealt.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you get to that level. Trey Hendrickson also I don't think is going to be dealt because
Trey Hendrickson, Jeffrey Simmons, who I think
I can't see the Titans doing that.
No, I mean they have I think also said I've seen it reported that the Titans have said I think Kim Ward and Jeffrey Simmons are the only players on their roster who are not available.
Okay.
So I don't know who else you would necessarily want on that roster, and that kind of brings things back full circle. But
if you wanted Trey Hendrickson, you needed them to lose the Steelers.
Exactly.
Because they play the Jets this week, I believe.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But they're going to be 4-4.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be 4-4 because I don't know if Colts fans are paying attention to the Jets, but they feel like a bigger dumpster fire than the Titans at this point.
Yes, you're right. Well, when you've got your owner Woody Johnson basically just like going scorched earth to reporters, what was it, yesterday or the day before at the owners' meetings? That's not a good situation. No,
very, very bad. Sean Zibikowski says, is this also the last game in Lucas Oil until November 30th, week 13? It's going to be interesting to watch them on the road. I'm glad that Sean brought this up. Because, I'm annoyed that it's the last home game until November 30th. The schedule takes a definite turn. And I will say this, I don't really buy the Colts haven't played anybody argument that people are using to discount their 6-1 start because, people are like, well, they haven't played anybody. Well, they played the Broncos. The Broncos are a great defense. The Chargers coming in had very good defensive numbers. The Raiders' numbers on defense are actually better than you probably think.
Yeah.
I don't think that
there are the Rams in there.
The Rams are a good defense, and they put up tons of yards on them and should have put up 34 points if it wasn't for the A.D. Mitchell of it all. So like this is a team that's played really well. I do think though, going forward, like they're going to play better offenses, schedule wise, and they are going to be on the road a lot. They go to Pittsburgh, right after that they go to Germany. Right after that, they get a bye after that, but then they go right back to Kansas City. You get a whole month off here. The schedule, it gets harder. Does that mean that the Colts are going to suddenly look completely different? I don't know, but when the schedule gets harder, like you're probably going to drop more games because you just don't have as many games like this against teams like the Titans, who you seriously go call up the stats for the Titans and just try to find the thing that they do well. At best they take the ball away, but the Colts don't turn it over. So I don't know if that really helps them that much.
As we mentioned in the media workroom right before we were taking off today, the Colts have one fumble this year, and it was A.D. Mitchell dropping the ball a couple feet before he walked into the end zone. And Daniel Jones has, is it 3 interceptions? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, it's the interesting thing about the fumbles is it's not like a lot of times you think about lost fumbles as fumble luck, which is not usually there's a regression to the mean. They just haven't fumbled the ball that much. They had a snap where Tanya Bortolini snapped a bad one to Daniel Jones. Sorry, Imagine Eric said. I mean, it is Joe Flacco too in the NFL. But they haven't put the ball on the ground very much, and I think that's more sustainable going forward than if it was like they were fumbling a lot and just recovering them. They just haven't had a whole lot of fumbles, and part of that is usually the highest fumble numbers are quarterbacks. But quarterbacks don't fumble the football if they don't get sacked. And Daniel Jones doesn't get sacked. He's been sacked 6 times all season.
Yeah, and he's we've spoken too about how the Colts are using him very differently, and Shane Steichen is seeing him as a different type of quarterback than how he was utilized in New York. New York saw him as a guy that would look to run at any moment's notice, and the Colts just haven't seen him and haven't used him that way. And when you're not running, you're not finding opportunities to put risk, putting the ball on the ground, and coupling that with a great offensive line that they have. There's just there's not going to be very many opportunities, I don't think, until we see maybe some stronger defenses. But I don't know that we're going to even necessarily get to that point. I really don't see a reason why that would change.
The interesting thing to me with the offense is that I don't know what the pass rush looks like for a different team that suddenly changes what we think about this protection, because they've seen different groups. Like the Broncos have the elite pass rusher, and then they will also blitz a lot. They gave up 1 sack against them. The Rams are the style where they rush 4, but they have a ton of different rushers, and they did put pressure on Jones, but they only got 1 sack. Like we've seen them come in. We've seen a team like the Raiders with Max Crosby come in, and they just slide everything that way and hit him with a bunch of different people, and they gave up 0 or 1 sacks. Like they've already faced a lot of different units, and so you're going, what's the magic formula to get to Daniel Jones and sack him a bunch of times? Short of injuries to the offensive line, I don't know what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great point. One other, I know, circling back quickly to trade deadline stuff. Outside, we talked a lot about the defense. I saw someone mention the other day, and I thought it was a somewhat reasonable point that another way you could look to go at the deadline was just adding a veteran quarterback, like say, I don't know, a Russell Wilson into that quarterback room, just as insurance in case something fluky would happen to Daniel Jones. You never know when those moments are going to happen until they hit you. And I wonder what you think about the possibility of Chris Ballard going and adding some QB assurance when you look at the roster of QBs that the Colts have on the roster at this point, in case something were to happen to Daniel Jones over the next couple of weeks.
I definitely think you could upgrade the backup. I definitely think you could upgrade the backup quarterback. The hard part is who's available in a trade, and and in terms of that, like, can you go? Say you bring in Russell Wilson, like do the Giants want to do that with Jackson Dart, sort of seemingly putting his body in harm's way every time he runs? I don't know. Is Jameis Winston available? But the other thing is just there's not a lot of obvious places where they're going to give up their backup quarterback. I think this is kind of like the kicker discussion that Nat and I had once. I think if you're a terrible team, not going anywhere, and you have a decent backup, you should look to trade them. I don't know that it always plays out that way. In terms of the Browns, kind of just did it by sending Joe Flacco to the Bengals, but at the same time, that deal feels like an outlier more than anything else. I do think you could get better at backup quarterback for sure.
I mean, and the Bengals are a kind of a unique situation where they were looking to find someone to actually start. They weren't just looking for a backup. They weren't looking for someone who was a backup to put in the backup spot. They were willing to, again, I don't know that you're going all in when you're getting someone's backup quarterback, but they were purposefully looking for that to, I don't know, save their season or at least try to see what they could do with this season when they didn't have Joe Burrow anymore.
Yeah, I also think that at some point, like as much as they have resources to trade, and I think that Chris Ballard can get back some of those late round picks if he needs it. I also think he probably well, I shouldn't say I think the history of Chris Ballard suggests that he's not going to trade away like the whole back of his draft to people. So you're probably getting you're probably if they're going to make a play on defense, I don't know if they're going to make a play for backup quarterback.
Yeah, good point. Should we touch on, before we finish up here, some of the injury news that we learned today at the Colts facility? Talked to Shane Steichen before practice got rolling. I think the most notable thing that we heard there, a guy we mentioned earlier when we were talking about the defense, Jalen Jones starts his 21-day window to be activated off of the injury reserve list. He was practicing today. I don't think we know exactly when he's going to be activated, whether he could be in line to return this weekend against Tennessee. Frankly, I don't know why you would rush that unless he just really feels like he's ready and you want to give him some game reps in a game that frankly may not mean a whole lot for that defense. What were your thoughts on hearing about him having at least now the potential to be able to start ramping up and coming back in a couple weeks?
Well, I've said all along, I think that Jalen Jones is their best hope at that other cornerback spot. Now, a lot of times I said that when Charvarius Ward was still available. You expect to get Ward at some back at some point this season. Steichen said that, I believe, on Monday while I was still flying. But in terms of getting Jalen Jones back, he's a guy that the defensive staff didn't seem super excited about earlier in the year, and I don't understand why, because he's been a very solid starting type corner for 2 years in the NFL. He's battled hamstring injuries all season. I think now, though, with what's happened to them at the corner position, he's going to, like, you whether or not they have misgivings, they better get over him, because I would rather have Jalen Jones out there if he's healthy than Jonathan Edwards or Cameron Mitchell. And then maybe you can play some more of the matchup game stuff you were doing with Mekhi Blackman before. As far as him playing this weekend, so I asked Shane, is he going to need a ramp-up period? And he kind of pushed back on that a little bit and said that the training staff has already ramped him up a little bit. So I wonder, it left me wondering if they feel like he's going to be ready to play at least a little bit this week. And then I think the argument for that is you get him some game reps against a Titans team that you feel like is maybe not great. If you really feel like he's healthy and you've done the ramp up behind the scenes away from our eyes, do you ease him in against the Titans before he has to go on the road against a better offense like the Pittsburgh Steelers or the Atlanta Falcons? I wonder if that would maybe be thinking in that case.
That certainly makes a lot of sense. I think maybe the only risk there is the fact that they clearly brought him back too early, and it's the reason why he's been out since week 1 this season. He injured that same hamstring during training camp and missed a couple weeks, and then comes back for the season opener against the Miami Dolphins and injures that in special teams action. And now he's been out since, until at least at minimum week 8. So I don't know if you need to be there's probably pros and cons with being extra cautious and making sure he's, excuse the cliche, 110% ready versus just giving him a couple reps and seeing how that feels. I guess that's the one concern with a hamstring is that it's good until it's not. And I don't know how much you can really tell that you've maybe pushed things a little too far without having done a little bit more damage. So those are the pros and cons of that. But that seems like, in theory, if he is indeed healthy and ready, that would be a good way to go into this, considering who they play over the next couple games after we get past Tennessee.
Yeah, the hamstring thing, I wish that we had a little more information on it. We don't necessarily know. You'd hope that they've done imaging to make sure it's all healed in there. Hamstring injuries, I think, as most people know, are kind of notoriously fickle, and they take a little while to build back up strength. So, yeah, I think there's risk here no matter what, considering that he not only did he hurt it in training camp, he also hurt it in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And so this has kind of been an ongoing thing all year for him, and that definitely is a concern. You hope that if they're bringing him back to practice now, they've already been extra cautious, and he felt like he could come back 2 weeks ago. It's kind of what I would hope.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't necessarily get to see all that stuff. I kind of remind people of this on the podcast all the time. We see 20 minutes of practice. They generally do their rehab stuff outside of that for the most part. And so we don't always have a good handle on what they're doing. He seemed confident when we talked to him today.
Mm-hmm.
But, also I think we've said this on the podcast before, players are maybe not the best estimators of their own physical ability, because most of them, they want to be on the field. So you kind of need to talk to a doctor, and unfortunately NFL teams don't let us do that.
That's a good point. We also were told and learned that Josh Downs and Ashton Dolan back practicing this week, which certainly helps out that wide receiver corps that had been significantly hampered in terms of just numbers and healthy bodies against the Chargers. Of course, it didn't seem to matter too much for an offense that scored 38 points, but that seems to be notable. On the flip side of that, you've got Samson, forgive me if I pronounce his last name wrong, Ebukam, who is week to week, and Tyquan Lewis, who is day to day, and injuries that they suffered in the midst of that game against the Chargers. We'll learn a little bit more over the next day or two, particularly on Tyquan, if he's going to be available to go this weekend against Tennessee. But it seems like there's always something, as this team is getting healthier in one place, it's suffering some injuries in another area. And at least over these last couple of weeks, not quite able to get full strength. I don't know that any team in the NFL necessarily is, but certainly interesting that it seems like this wide receiver group is going up as this defensive end trio with just three healthy guys right now is facing a little bit of adversity at the moment, at least.
Yeah, when Lewis and Ebukam left the game on Sunday, my thought was, I just wrote that they should trade for a corner because they've got all their defensive ends healthy. And then now they don't have them healthy again. It doesn't sound like either of them are long term, so I don't know if that really played a role in it. But that did cross my head while I was sitting there in Los Angeles. Again, this is maybe a game where you feel a little bit better about not having defensive ends or having fewer of them, because the tackles are so bad. The Titans offensive line is so bad, and Cam Ward holds onto the ball as much as he does. Yeah, I think you probably try to be careful with Tyquan Lewis. Those soft tissue type injuries, you maybe want to make sure that they're back to full strength. But it would leave you in a spot where you probably have to bring up somebody from the practice squad, just because I almost think you want to do that anyway with this game, because Cam Ward is fast and I want someone to chase them down. I think that's the other thing with the trade deadline is, like, I want another speed rusher besides Latu. Everybody else is kind of the same type of guy. And I almost wish there was another speed guy available. So it is interesting though. Ebicom being down for a little bit is interesting. We've got a question. I'm trying to find some answers to it. Imagine Eric says Ebicom has been underwhelming this year. In my opinion, do you think JT Tuimoloau will perform better? So, number one, the Colts should have seen Ebicom playing not at the level he played at 2 years ago coming. We talked about that extensively on this podcast back in training camp. He's coming off of an Achilles injury. Every single player I've ever covered who's had an Achilles injury says that, you know, you have a different, like it takes you a little bit while to get back to your full explosiveness, and by a little while I mean like a whole season of football. So I definitely think that's part of it. In terms of Tuimoloau, when he's played, it hasn't necessarily been like a ton better than Ebicom. I agree that Ebicom has not played as well as maybe you'd expect, or I shouldn't say as you'd expect. I kind of expected this, but he hasn't played as well as he had before. I don't know. I'm trying to find right now. I'm trying to get on Next Gen Stats and give something. I wonder if maybe if you give Tuimoloau more of a consistent role, if he starts to improve. That's my question. He's a young guy. I don't know that his numbers are great so far. He's got 4 pressures. His pressure percentage is 11.1. That's not great. His time to pressure so far is 3.08. That's also not great. It is faster though than Ebicom's 3.41. Ebicom has a better pressure percentage. Ebicom has pretty much just been like a power rusher. He's just been bull rushing. I think Tuimoloau is probably physically more capable, and I do wonder if to answer you, Imagine Eric, I wonder if you just give Tuimoloau more snaps, if he improves some, because he really hasn't played that much as a second round pick so far. And I wonder if the upside there, giving him more snaps, is a better idea than giving Ebicom. You got just Tuimoloau has 36 pass rush snaps so far. I wonder if you give him more of that if he starts to improve a little bit.
No, I mean that's a good thought, and it seems like, as much as great of an opportunity as there might be this season to try to learn more about someone actually in game instead of just trying to see what you can see in practice or looking back or thinking back to what you saw in training camp when coaches, were able to spend even a little bit more consistent time with these guys. It seems like a great, I don't know. I know you don't want to experiment in a game, but when you're dealing with someone who's you're trying to nurse back to full health, who's got a little bit of a nagging injury, that seems like a perfect thing to at least roll the dice with this weekend. In the game, again, I know any team can beat any team in the NFL, but I don't know that you're necessarily going to lose a game on one single player in a situation like that. So that, certainly that makes a lot of sense to me, and worth testing out maybe this weekend if you need to give Taekwon a little bit more time.
Man, it's rare in the NFL where you look at a game and you're like, I just don't see how this team can win, but this is one of them. It'd be so against everything we've seen from both teams so far.
It seems like it would require, like it would almost require, early game Daniel Jones injury type of situation.
It feels like if it was short of a quarterback injury.
Yeah.
And I did text you guys the other. We'll leave this for the podcast audience. I did text you guys yesterday and wondered aloud if Riley Leonard could beat the Titans. I don't know if that's a half serious. That might be a half serious question. I just think they look so bad on paper, especially without Simmons and Snead. But the formula for the Titans is like, short of an injury to Jones, the formula for the Titans to win this game is like you get a kick return touchdown or some kind of huge play on special teams where you get to score. you hit a couple big pass plays to receivers, and then you turn Daniel Jones over a couple times, or you get some fumble luck.
Maybe throw a special team score in there.
It just feels like it's a really tough line to thread, and all of that's predicated somehow on keeping the Colts from scoring.
Yeah.
Which they don't. Rigoberto Sanchez doesn't have enough punts to qualify for the punting lead this season. So, yeah, trying to draw up how the Titans win this game, it really does. Maybe on Sunday night we're talking about, I can't believe the Colts lost this game just because it's NFL. But when you look at it on paper, it just seems really, really hard. That's probably why the betting line is 14 points. That's not an NFL line. NFL betting lines are not 2 touchdowns.
No, it's not. Maybe who knows? Maybe someone listening to this will be sending this to Freezing Cold Takes, and we'll laugh at this either watching or listening back to this. But I'm right there with you. I just can't imagine a situation where Sunday night we're in a press conference with Shane, asking him, how did you guys lose to this terrible Titans team? But I guess weirder things have happened.
Weirder things have absolutely happened in the NFL. Absolutely. I mean, the Saints have a win this year. The Titans have a win this year. So maybe that's it. That'll be the first. I think that'll be the end of our first Colts Cover-2 podcast with Nathan on the beat. He's getting thrown into it. We're probably going to try to do some stuff. We're going to look for some segments and stuff to kind of structure this Wednesday pod a little bit. We're still working through that, coming up with ideas. We won't go full categories like we do on the Sunday podcast. Nathan gets his first chance to do that on Sunday. We're supposed to tell you to please like and subscribe. I forgot that. Please like and subscribe on our YouTube page. You get all these videos coming at you. But other than that, this is Nathan's first Colts Cover 2. Welcome him to the beat. We will talk to you again after the Colts play a very, very, very bad Tennessee Titans team.
See you guys then.